Hi there guys, my name is Mykola Miroshnichenko and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we'll talk about something important in terms of working with JSON. Every app that I worked with sooner or later encountered problems with the JSON it received from the APIs it was calling. So in this video, we will talk about how we can configure our JSON serializer to work with these problems. More specifically, we will talk about missing fields, default values for certain fields, different names of variables, and we'll work with malformed JSON such as different data types. So let's get to it. All right, let me show you what we will be working with. So we have a really simple weather app that shows the cities and their corresponding weather. We have the temperature, the humidity percentage, and the actual description of the weather. Now let's look at the code to understand it better. So the main logic resides in our weather repository, and here we have a static JSON that we will be returning, which maps to our forecast object right here, which is a city, temperature, humidity, description, and those are the fields for our UI. Now we have this static data right here, and right now it's working okay. Then we have a mock engine that is programmed to respond with this predefined JSON that we have right here. And then we have this get forecasts request that we are directly invoking from our UI by launching a launched effect and then just simply fetching our forecasts and displaying them in our weather screen. So this is far from a clean architecture, but the point is here how we can work with different types of problematic JSON. As of now, the only thing that we have in our JSON configuration is our pretty print. And now we will introduce certain problems with our static JSON and solve them one by one with different JSON configurations. Okay, now let's say that certain objects that we have will be returning an icon URL for our weather. So for example, let's say the Sydney weather will return a weather icon that we can then use in our UI. But as of now, we don't really need it. However, our API still returns it. So let's see what will happen if we have a field that we are not using, but we are receiving from our server. As we can see, the app crashes, and that's because it's caused by blah blah encountered an unknown key weather icon. That means that our JSON serializer is basically not configured to handle cases when it encounters unknown keys such as weather icons. One way we can really easily fix this is by adding ignoreUnknownKeys to our JSON serializer. Now let's launch and see what happens. All right, we see that nothing is crashing. We have our weather reports for each of the cities, and our JSON serializer successfully ignores our weather icon. All right, one more common problem that we might have when parsing our JSON is certain legacy APIs might have a trailing comma at the end of their last field. So this is a problem. Let's see what will happen if we have that. As we can see, our app has crashed immediately, and what we have here is trailing commas are a non-compliant JSON, allow trailing comma true. Okay, so we can actually use this advice and add allow trailing comma to our serializer. And we need to actually opt in here. Now let's launch again. Awesome, everything works, even though we still have a trailing comma here. Now, another formatting problem that we might have is here we have all of our fields as in quotes, but that is not always the case in APIs. So sometimes certain APIs might have this kind of format, basically have a field as a regular string instead of it being in double quotes. So let's see what will happen if we have this kind of JSON. And our app has crashed, which is expected. And it says unexpected JSON, expected quotation mark. And this is also easily fixable with an option called isLenient true. And this is a useful option to have because this might actually expand to more use cases in the future. So it is a great option to have in your JSON configuration. Now, one more useful feature that the JSON serializer has that we can use in Kotlin serialization is something called a serial name. So for example, we have our temp C field here. And if we look at our forecast here, we are matching it identically, meaning the field we receive in JSON is identical to the field we have in our Kotlin code. But very often the APIs use underscores and other stuff that is not a Kotlin convention. For example, in our case, temp C is not really informative. So we want it changed, for example, to temperature in Celsius. One way we can do that without asking our backend to modify our API is we can have a serial name annotation, and we will put that we want this temp C field to match to our temperature in Celsius. Now, of course, we would need to change our code in the UI for this. So let's find our temp C. And let's check. Our original JSON hasn't changed. We still have a temp C here. Now let's see what will happen when we apply the serial name. And we can see that everything is working nicely. We have our temperature here, even though we have the temp C field here, and temperature in Celsius in our data class. Now, the final configuration option that we look at is something called coerceInputValues. Let's say, for example, that our description here is null by default, but that's not really informative to the user. What we want is we want to show by default a certain default value, like not available. Now, this is fine when the field is completely absent. For example, we don't have any description here. We'll just delete it, and let's see what we have for New York. So we can see that for New York, even though we don't have a field, it maps really nicely to our default value of not available. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes we might have an explicit null value. For example, we might have description, but it's actually null. Let's see what happens when we have this. And as you can see, we get a crash. If we take a look, it says unexpected null value instead of string literal. So even though we have a default value at this point, our serializer tries to match the null to our description field. One way we can fix this is by having an option called coerceInputValues. Now this will ignore nulls, and if we have a default value that we do not available, then it will actually use this default value instead of trying to convert the null. Let's see that in action. And as you can see, we get a not available for New York, even though here we are explicitly setting null to it. And that's pretty much it for this video. In this video, we took a look at probably the most important configurations in terms of JSON serialization for any production projects. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.